Hi there, everybody. It's nice to see you here today. First, let me start by saying I'm not an authority on Stoicism. I have no accreditation that I even know what the hell I'm talking about. All I'm going to cover during this introduction is my research, memory, and various aspects and pieces of written content. I am not and will never claim to be the definitive authority on the subject matter. I have loosely studied and practiced Stoicism for about 30 years. In this, I'm simply introducing Stoicism, maybe elaborating on a few misunderstood concepts. This will not be a teach you how to be a Stoic, nor is it meant to be. You need to do your own research. Of all people, those are at leisure who make time for philosophy. Only they truly live. Not satisfied to merely keep good watch over their own days, they annex every age to their own. All the harvest of the past is added to their store. Seneca. I found a really good introduction on Stoicism on the internet when I was looking up research material. And I'm just going to read part of it. It says, when we look back at the Stoics of the past, we are blessed to have these diaries of some of Rome's greatest emperors, personal letters of Rome's greatest playwrights, wisest power brokers, lectures of former slaves in exile, turned to influential teachers. Against all odds, some 2,000 years later, these incredible documents survive. They contain some of the greatest wisdom in the history of the world, the impoverished, the powerful, and the struggling in the pursuit of a good life. Except for some of the most serious seekers of wisdom, Stoicism is either unknown completely or misunderstood. The average person, this is a vibrant, action oriented, paradigm shifting way of life that has become shorthand for emotionless. Given the fact that the mere mention of philosophy makes most either nervous or bored, Stoic philosophy, on the surface, sounds like the last thing anybody would want to learn about, let alone need in their day to day life. Stoic is a tool in the pursuit of self mastery, preservation, and wisdom. Rather than some esoteric field of academic inquiry, Stoicism is something one uses to live a great life. Many of history's greatest minds not only understood Stoicism for what it was, they sought it out. So, how does Stoicism begin? Honestly, I don't even know if that really matters. But if you want to investigate, I suggest looking into the story of Zeno when he came to meet Crates in Stippo. I don't know if anybody's familiar with that story. Yeah, it's kind of like something you read out of the Bible. A dude is goes on an ocean trip, ends up abandoned on some piece of land where he's not familiar, runs into a guy that ends up becoming his teacher, and he learns about Stoicism. And where the hell did it start from before that? I don't know. Nobody really knows, I don't think. But who were some of the Stoic philosophers? I get asked that sometimes. Who were the Stoic philosophers, or what were their names? And the first Stoics have been around, like I said earlier, for over 2,500 years. Now, every era has had their own practitioners of Stoicism, and we even have them today. There are, of course, the classic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, but there have been a lot more over history, including some more recently in U.S. history, like Washington, Emerson, and Roosevelt, which are a couple presidents that might be familiar with. Once you learn the teachings and understand the philosophy, you learn how to recognize the followers of Stoicism. a lot. What are good books on Stoicism? From time to time, I get asked, and I can't say that I've ever found a single book with all the rules and the philosophies wrapped into one package. Pretty much anything by Marcus Aurelius is a good place to start. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius is probably one of my favorites. Epictetus is very good. Some of you have read some of these books before. Letters from a Stoic by Seneca is pretty good. There are some modern ones, but I haven't read them. I just know about them. There's one by Ryan Holiday and Stephen Hanselman called The Daily Stoic. Might be worth a check. Or The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. But that was a basic introduction. We're actually right now we're going to get into Stoicism. Two eyes, two ears, one mouth. Remain a student. Act accordingly and wisely. The Stoic constructed one of the most advanced and philosophically interesting theories of mindset in the classical world. As in contemporary cognitive science, the Stoics rejects the idea that the mind is an I can't say this word, incorporeal, there we go, incorporeal entity. Instead, they argue that the mind or the soul must be something corporeal, something that obeys the laws of physics. Moreover, they hold that the mental state and acts of the corporeal soul were believed it was a broader concept than just like the mind or the spirit. The soul was believed to be like the hot, fiery breath infused into the body. So what are some of the virtues of Stoicism? There are four: courage, temperance, justice, and wisdom. These are the most essential values in Stoic philosophy. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If at some point in your life you should come across anything better than justice, truth, self-control, courage, it must be an extraordinary thing indeed." That was almost 2,000 years ago. Since then, we've discovered a lot of things: automobiles, the internet, cures for diseases. But yeah, anything better than those? Nah, probably not. Especially as a moral governing doctrine. Nah. Being brave? No. Moderation and sobriety. Doing what's right. Truth and understanding. I would say no, not really. And it's unlikely we ever will. Everything we face in life is an opportunity to respond with one of these four traits. Now you think about that for a second. Courage, temperance, justice, and wisdom. Everything we face in life is an opportunity to respond with one of those four virtues. Courage. The universe, life, wants to know if you have what it takes. Can you be brave? The Stoic would probably phrase it differently. Seneca said that he pitied people who have never experienced misfortune. You have passed through life without an opponent. No one can ever know what you are capable of, not even you. Life will occasionally send difficult situations your way. Don't think of these as inconveniences or tragedies, but as opportunities, as questions to answers. Am I going to face this problem or run away from it? Will I stand up or be rolled over? Am I brave enough to deal with this? When you're faced with these times and decisions, write them down in a journal. Write down your actions, your responses, keep some kind of record book. And let these records remind you of the importance of courage. And we're gonna go over more of the journal later. Temperance. Of course, life is so simple to say that courage is all that matters. While most would agree courage is essential, we're also aware of people whose bravery turns into recklessness and becomes their fault by endangering themselves and others. Aristotle used courage as the main example in his metaphor, the golden mean. One end of the spectrum was cowardice, a deficiency of courage. On the other end, there was recklessness, too much courage. What was called for was a golden mean, or the right amount, the golden mean. This is what temperance or moderation is about. Doing nothing in excess, doing the right thing, the right amount, the right way. Aristotle says we are what we repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence is not an act, but a habit. So as a Stoic sees the world clearly, but also sees clearly what the world could be, and they can be brave and strategic enough to help to bring that vision ready. Is anybody got any questions so far? Justice, being brave, finding the right balance. These are part of the core Stoic virtues. But in their seriousness, they pale in comparison to what the Stoic focuses on most, doing the right thing. There is no Stoic virtue more important than justice because it influences all others. Marcus Aurelius, he said, the source of all other virtues is justice. Stoics throughout history have pushed and advocated for justice, oftentimes at great personal risk, taking great amounts of courage to do so and defending these ideas, sometimes to the death. Of course, you look at Thomas Wentworth on there's lots of them. I mean, just think everybody that stood up for justice in history and was willing to die for it. Many activists and political heroes throughout history have turned to Stoicism to fortify themselves against the difficulties of fighting for their ideas, to guide them towards what was right when the world is got a lot of wrong in it. A Stoic must deeply believe in an individual can make a difference. Successful activism and maneuvering in political environment requires an understanding of strategy as well as realism and hope. It requires wisdom, acceptance, and refusal to accept the status quo. It was James Baldwin who brilliantly captured this in Tennyson in his notes, Native Son. And I don't know if you want me to read that or not, but look at the notes of A Native Son and read Tennyson. Everybody should read Tennyson anyways. You know what I'm talking about. Wisdom. Courage, temperance, and justice. These are critical virtues of life, but what situations call for courage? Well, what is the right amount? Well, what is the right thing? This is where the final and essential virtue comes into play. Wisdom, the knowing, the learning, the experience required to navigate the world. Wisdom has always been prized by the Stoics. Zeno said that we were given 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. It is to listen more than we talk. And since we have 2 ears or 2 eyes, we are obligated to read and observe as we talk, as more than we talk as well. It is paramount today as it was in the ancient world, to be able to distinguish between the vast amounts of information that lay about at your disposal. What is actual need to have a good life? It's key to study and to keep your mind open. You can't learn if you already know. You can't learn what you already think you know. It's not going to happen. They say, if your cup is full, you're not putting anything else in there. Therefore, we need to not only be humble students, but we also need to seek out great teachers. That is why we should always be reading. That is why we cannot stop training. That's why we must be diligent in filtering out the signals in the noise. The goal is not just to acquire information, but the right kind of information, the facts that stand out from the background noise. That's what you need to absorb, what you need to learn. Nobody cares what the Kardashians are doing. Thousands of years of insight are available to the world. And right now, you have the power to learn anything you want at your fingertips. So to honor the Stoic virtue of wisdom, we need to slow down, be deliberate, and find the wisdom in the things that we need. So how do you become a Stoic? The first thing I say you need to work on is control. There's a video of a student that brings a jar into the classroom and asks the students, is the jar full? I don't know if you all have ever seen this video before. For those that haven't, we can play it. It's a few minutes. Won't take that long to get through it. I go to share screen.
Good afternoon, everyone. We all have this one life to live. Fleeting shadow amongst all that exists in this vast universe. We have the ability to accomplish anything, truly anything, if we use our time wisely. Is this jar full? And is it full now? And how about now? Is the jar full now? Yes. I want you to recognize that this jar represents your life. Golf balls are the important things, your family, your friends, your health, and your passions. The pebbles are the other important things, your car, your job, your home. Sand is everything else. It's just a small stuff. Now, if you put the sand in the jar first, you won't have room for the pebbles or the golf balls. The same is true in life. You spend all your energy and your time on the small stuff. You won't have time for all the really important things that matter to you. Pay attention to the things that are critical to your happiness. Take care of the golf balls first, the really important things. Set your priorities, because everything else is just... Yes.
Professor, what does the beer represent?
I'm glad you asked. It goes to show full your life may seem to be. There's always room for a couple of beers with a friend.
I like that. There's always room for a couple beers with your friend. This is the control we're looking for in Stoicism. Not control over the environment or other things that we cannot control. We control over ourselves, our thoughts, our emotions, and how we choose to experience life. The single most important practice in the Stoic philosophy is the difference between what we and what we can't, what we have influence over and what we do not. A flight is delayed because of weather. No amount of yelling at the airline is going to end the storm. No amount of wishing will make you taller or shorter or born in a different country. No matter how hard you try, you can't make someone like you. And on top of that, time is immovable objects. It's time you could have been spent on things that you can change. You should return to this question daily, and each and every when you write in your journal and reflect on it. If you can focus on making clear what parts of your day are within your control and what parts are not, you will not only be happier, but you'll have a distinct advantage over people who fail to realize what is under their control and what is not when they're fighting an unwinnable battle. Start putting your efforts towards where they can be utilized to make an actual difference in your life. In your journal, if you care now about the marches and counter marches of the Roman commanders, what the centuries have clung to is a notebook of thoughts by a man who realized, or whose real life was largely unknown, who put down in the midnight dimness, not even the events of the day and the plans of tomorrow, but something for a more permanent interest, the ideas and aspirations that a rare spirit lived by. That was Brad Blanchard. He's talking about, of all the things that happened in the Roman Empire, what a lot of people really look for are the journals that were written by the Stoics, Aurelius, Seneca, Epictetus. Epictetus, the slave, Marcus Aurelius, the emperor, Seneca, the power broker and playwright. These three radically different men led radically different lives, but they had one habit in common: journaling. It would be Epictetus that said the philosophy was something that we should write down day by day. In his writings was how one should exercise themselves. Seneca's favorite time to journal was in the darkness had fallen and his wife had gone to sleep in the evening. He said, I examine my entire day, go back over what I've done and said, hiding nothing from myself, passing nothing by. Then we would go to bed and find that he was sleep, which followed his self-examination, was particularly sweet. Marcus, one of the most substantial collections of journal entries, has one of the most substantial collections of journal entries that survive to today. And in Stoicism, the art of journaling is more than just keeping a diary. This is the daily practice of writing these things down is the philosophy of Stoicism. Preparing for the day ahead, reflecting on the day that passed, reminding oneself of the wisdom that we have learned from our teachings and from our reading and from our experiences. It is not enough to simply hear a lesson once. Instead, one practices them over and over again, repeatedly. Turn the lesson over in your mind, and most importantly, write them down in any feelings that flow through you when you're doing so. Stoicism is designed to be practiced. It's not a philosophy you read once and magically you understand it at some soul level. It's a lifelong pursuit that requires diligence, repetition, and concentration. With the weekly and monthly overlays is we organize the processes and thoughts of how a practicing Stoic is putting things up for review. That way, it's easier to digest it. It's something you pass through once, but every single day over the course of a year, preferably year in and year out. Epictetus is right. It is something you're supposed to do at all times. So you can refer back to it like a collection of greatest hits. Go back and read those things you needed to refresh on. And it's almost impossible to practice Stoicism without practicing journaling. The next thing is to practice misfortune. It is in times of security that the spirit should be prepared itself for the difficult times. While fortune is bestowing favor on, it is then the time to be strengthened against her rebuffs. And that's from Seneca. Seneca, who enjoyed a great wealth as an advisor to Nero, suggested that we ought to set aside a certain number of days each month to practice poverty. Take little food, wear your worst clothes, get away from the comfort of your home and your bed, put yourself face to face with want, he said, and you will, in this way, you'll learn not to dread it. It won't be scary anymore. You'll face it and learn to overcome it. It's important to remember that this is an exercise and not a rhetorical device. It doesn't mean think about what it would be like to not have the luxuries that we live with every day. And he means go live it. Comfort is the worst kind of slavery. Did you hear that? Comfort is the worst kind of slavery because you're always afraid of something or someone will take it away. But if you can anticipate and practice misfortune, then the chance of you losing that comfort is less scary. It no longer keeps control over you in your day-to-day life. Many times practitioners of Stoicism have taken this further than I think Seneca intended, which is why people often days can compare Stoics to minimalists. We're not minimalists. We do practice misfortune, but I like to watch TV as much as the next lazy guy. Emotions like anxiety and fear have their roots in uncertainty, suspicion, and the future, and rarely in experience. Anyone who has made a big bet on themselves knows how much energy both states can consume. This solution to do something about that ignorance, the solution is to do something about the ignorance. Make yourself familiar with the things that you fear, worst case scenarios, and anything you're afraid of. Practice understanding to overcome what you fear rather than simulation in your mind or in real life. The downside is almost always reversible or transient. It means if something bad were to happen, probably not that big a deal, easily fixed, and we'll get over it and move on. You train your perceptions. Choose not to be harmed, and you won't feel harmed. Don't feel harmed, and you haven't been. Marcus Aurelius. This is probably one of the hardest concepts to really understand. Most people by nature want to fight or oppose things that seem confrontational or obstinate. The Stoic has an exercise called turning the obstacle upside down. What this is meant to do is make it impossible to practice the art of philosophy, meaning if you can't properly turn a problem upside down, if you can properly turn every problem upside down, then every bad becomes a source of good. Suppose you're trying to help someone and they respond by being surly, unwilling to cooperate. Instead of letting your life be made more difficult, the exercise says you're actually directing towards virtue, the opportunity to practice patience, or maybe understanding. So rather than being frustrated and burning through this energy and having negative experience about it, look at where you can be learning from it. So you run out of food. You don't focus on you're sure you're going to focus on getting more food, but in the meantime, when your stomach grumbles, you don't think, boy, am I hungry. This is horrible. Rather, think about how you've been meaning to lose weight or practice restraint. Well, this is a good opportunity to use some of that. So what you do is you take circumstances that may suck and you look for the good in them and how this is going to benefit you. It's all ephemeral, transient, and temporary. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself, a simple and effective reminder to help him regain perspective and stay balanced. Run down the list of those who felt intense anger at something. The most famous, the most unfortunate, the most hated, the most whatever. Where is all that now? Smoke, dust, legend, or not even legend. Think of all the examples and how trivial things we want so passionately are. It is important to note that passion here is not in the modern use where we're familiar with enthusiasm, or it's not just being enthusiastic about something or caring about something. When the ancient Stoics discuss overcoming passions, they're referring to irrational, unhealthy, excessive desire and emotions. Anger would be a good, would be a good example. What's important to remember is the crucial bit. They seek to replace them with such as joy instead of excessive pleasure. Moderation. Return to the point of the exercise. It's simple. Remember how small you are. For all the matter, remember how small most everything is. Remember that achievements can be ephemeral, that your possession of them is for a speck of an instant in the line of eternity. You know, you may have the coolest guitar in the world now. For the rest of eternity, who knows where to be. Everything is ephemeral does not mean everything is ephemeral. What does that matter? Right now matters. Being a good person, doing the right thing right now, that's what matters, and that's what's important to the Stoic. In living in the moment, remember learning about Alexander the Great, who conquered the known world, has cities named in his honor. That's pretty common knowledge. The Stoic points out that while Alexander was drunk, he got mad and stabbed one of his best friends to death. And Alexander is said to have regretted that till the day he died. And so for all the great things that he'd accomplished, he was not good at living in the moment. A view from above, how beautifully Plato put it. Whatever you want to talk about people, it is best to take a bird's eye view and see everything all at once. Of gatherings, armies, farms, weddings, divorces, births, deaths, noisy courtrooms, silent spaces, every foreign people, holiday, memorials, markets, all blended together and arranged in a pairing of opposites. Marcus Aurelius. Marcus would often practice an exercise that is referred to as taking the view from above, or Plato's view. It invites us to step back, zoom out, and see it from a higher vantage point than our own. This exercise, envisioning all the millions and millions of people, all the armies, farms, weddings, divorce, prompts us to take perspective, and just how the previous exercise reminds us how small we are, it reorientates us. And as a Stoic, a scholar, Perry Haddett, put it, the view from above changes our value of judgments on things like luxury, power, war, the worries of everyday life. It all starts to become ridiculous. Seeing how small we are in the grand scheme of things is often one portion of the exercise. And the second, which is more subtle, is to tap onto what the Stoics call sympathia, or mutual interdependence. It is the experience a real view from above. As the astronaut Edgar Mitchell, one of the first people to actually see the world from outer space, he put it, in outer space, you develop an instant global consciousness, a people orientation, an intense dissatisfaction with the state of the world, and a compulsion to do something about it. Take a step back from your own concerns and remind yourself of your duty to others, and take Plato's view. Memento mori. Meditate on your own mortality. Let us prepare our minds as if we'd come to every end of life. Let us postpone nothing. Let us balance. Well, I can't speak today. Sorry. Let us balance life's books.
Okay, you're doing great.
The one who puts the finishing touches on their life each day is never short of time. That was by Seneca. This quote from Seneca above takes part of memento mori, a practice of reflection on mortality that is shared by other cultures and philosophies as well, such as Bushido and the Way of the Samurai. In his meditations, Marcus Aurelius wrote that you could leave life right now and let it determine what you would do and think and say. That was a personal reminder of continue to live. You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. That was a personal reminder to continue living a life of virtue now and not wait, which is a sentiment also shared by the samurai in the practice of Bushido. Meditating on your life's mortality is only depressing if you miss the point. The Stoics find this thought invigorating and humbling. It is not surprising that one of Seneca's biographies is titled Dying Every Day. After all, it is Seneca who urged us to tell ourselves, you may not wake up tomorrow. Going to bed and you may not sleep again. When we wake up as a reminder of our mortality, or as another Stoic, Epictetus, urged his students, keep death and exile before your eyes each day, along with everything else that seems terrible. By doing so, you will never have a base thought, nor will you have an excessive desire. Use those reminders and meditate on them daily. Let them be the building blocks of living your life to the fullest for each second. Think about why meditating and reflecting on your mortality might be good, and how you perceive the world and the day-to-day life, and how you treat yourself and others. It's just think about it. Not now. You get tonight, later. Prima dato malorum. Premeditation of evil or will. What is quite unlooked for is more crushing in its effect, and unexpectedness adds to the weight of a disaster. This is the reason for ensuring that nothing ever takes us by surprise. We should project our thoughts ahead of us at every turn and have in mind every possible eventuality instead of only the usual course of events. Rehearse them in your mind. Exile, torture, war, shipwreck, all the terms of human lot should be before your eyes. Seneca. The premedita malorum is a Stoic exercise in which imagining things that could go wrong or be taken away from us. It helps us in preparing for life's inevitable setbacks. We do not always get what is rightfully ours, even when we've earned it. Despite what we may desire, life is not fair. Nothing, not everything is as clean and as straightforward as we think it should be or may be. Psychologically, we must prepare ourselves for this to happen. It is one of the most powerful exercises in the Stoics toolkit, and it helps you build resilience and strength. Seneca, for instance, would begin by reviewing or rehearsing his plans, say to take a trip. Then in his head, he'd go over the things that could go wrong and prevent it from happening. A storm could rise, captain could fall ill, the ship could be attacked, whatever. And he would keep playing these scenarios out in his head. Nothing happens to the wise men against his expectations, nor do things turn out for him as he wished, but as he reckoned. Above all, he reckoned that something could block his plans. By doing this exercise, Seneca was always prepared for the disruption and always working disruption into his plans. He was fit for either defeat or victory. Amor fatati, or the love of fate. The great German philosopher, and I say that with satire, Nietzsche would describe his formula for human greatness as amor fatati, a love of fate. That one wants nothing to be different, not forward, not backwards, not in all eternity, not merely bear what is necessary, still less conceal it, but love it. The Stoics were not only familiar with this attitude, but it tends to be embraced. For 2,000 years ago, the writing in his own personal journal, Emperor Marcus Aurelius would say, a blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is known into it. Another Stoic, Epictetus, would say, do not seek for things to happen the way you want them to. Rather, wish what happens happen the way it happens so that you will be happy. It is why amor fatati is a Stoic exercise of the mindset where you take on for the making of the best out of everything. Anything that happens is going to happen, and treat each and every moment, no matter how challenging, as if something to be embraced and not avoided. Not only to be okay with it, but for it to be better and like oxygen to a fire, something that will fuel it. And that is it.
Thank you so much. Like I was saying, it's so much information. Uh, so much to take down.
I can always go slower, revisit things if people want to take notes, or I can just send you a PDF copy.
A PDF would be wonderful.
There's a lot of notes in here that are for me when I was reading it, but like there are lots of quotes from people that I didn't
either that or like
about.
a PowerPoint would be good.
There's lots of stuff like on the first page. There's entire sections that are in real little print that I didn't even read. That,
okay.
But if somebody was like, "Oh, really? Well, what about that?" Well, I have an answer for you.
Ha ha ha. Yeah, I hear you.
And then I just wrote down some of my favorite quotes from different Stoic history. If anybody's ever interested in those.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
could you give us that book list again?
Yeah. And do you want me to just send you a copy of the list, or I can tell you a bunch of books?
You can send it either way, however you want to do it.
I think I got these out of order again. Okay, here we go.
All right.
I'm
typing.
Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Letters from a Stoic by Seneca. Discourses by Epictetus. The Daily Stoic by Ryan Holiday and Stephen Hanselman. And lastly, The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. As I said, that's basically meant as an introduction. If anybody wants to email me, I'll be happy to go over things that I know and help them discover Stoicism on their own. It's not meant to be a course on how to be a Stoic. I just like to mention some of the lessons that we learn over time and virtues and things like that. If anybody's interested in practicing Stoicism, get a journal. Even I have a journal. I don't write it in every day. I should, but.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
To the journaling part?
Yeah.
Hi. I was just going to say, for anyone who hasn't spent the last 30 odd years working on Stoicism as he has, it's worth starting out small with something as simple as an analysis in a journal. So making it quite a specific journaling process and not just like writing whatever you're thinking. So if you do something like at the end of your day, choose one thing that you did or one experience that you had during the day and ask yourself, what was I thinking and feeling that led to me reacting in the way that I did? And then you go through and go, okay, had I been responding with the 4 principles of Stoicism in mind, how would I have reacted differently? And then what was in the way of me doing that? Because you start to develop this practice of seeing where you're already embodying some of the principles, because often when we see something big like this, we're like, oh God, now I've got to change everything and start from scratch. But look at where you're already doing it, find where you're struggling to embody those principles, and learn what's standing in your way. So just a bit of a focus journaling tool. That was it. Just for people who haven't been doing it for 300 years like you have. Oh, we can't hear you, Roz.
Oh, I was just saying 300 is a long time.
He's really old.
All right, well, I guess if there's nothing left, at 6 o'clock, I'm sure in the next class will be wanting to do whatever it does.
Thank you so much, Wescli, or not Wescli. Really appreciate you. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.